So now that we've talked about the process of ventilation, we're going to get into the control of ventilation. So how the nervous system is actually able to control the process of breathing. So like I said, breathing is controlled by the nervous system and by certain chemicals. So we're going to start off with the nervous control of breathing. The respiratory control center in the brain automatically sends out nerve signals to the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles of the rib cage, causing inspiration to occur. Like we said previously, with the contraction of those muscles, the rib cage expands, causing air to rush inward. When the respiratory center stops sending nerve signals to the diaphragm and the rib cage, the muscles will relax and expiration will occur. You may have heard of sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, or crib death. This is a homeostatic imbalance of this particular system. An infant under 1 year is put to bed seemingly healthy, and sometimes while sleeping the child stops breathing. The cause of SIDS is not known, but vaccinations, vomiting, infections have all been ruled out as factors. What the current assumption is that there's a miscommunication between the respiratory center of the brain and the lungs. So although the brain is sending those signals, the lungs just aren't receiving the message. The diaphragm, the intercostal muscles simply are not receiving that message to inspire, to contract and open up the lungs. So there you go. So to continue on with that, although the respiratory center automatically controls the rate and depth of breathing, it's going to be influenced by the nervous system. So you can voluntarily change your breathing pattern for speaking, singing, eating, swimming underwater, all of those things. You can actually voluntarily control that system. So following forced inspiration, so forcing yourself to take a big breath, stretch receptors in the airway walls will initiate an inhibitory nerve impulses that stop the respiratory center from sending out nerve signals and overstretching the lungs. So once you have consciously filled your lungs, you will not continue to automatically fill your lungs. And that's the nervous control of breathing. There is also a chemical control of breathing. Cells produce carbon dioxide during cellular respiration. Carbon dioxide then enters the blood where it combines with water, forming an acid that breaks down and gives off hydrogen ions. So in other words, it's an acid. It's giving off hydrogen ions. The hydrogen ions decrease the pH of the blood. Remember, when we are increasing acidity, we are decreasing pH. The lower we are on the pH scale, the more acidic the solution is. There are chemoreceptors, sensory receptors that are sensitive to the chemical composition of body fluids. And there are 2 sets of chemoreceptors that are sensitive to pH that can cause your breathing to speed up. So one set is in the medulla oblongata of the brainstem, and the other is in the carotid bodies of the carotid arteries and the aortic bodies of the aorta. In other words, these chemoreceptors mostly respond to carbon dioxide levels of the blood. When the blood pH decreases, so when it becomes more acidic, the respiratory center increases the rate and depth of breathing to remove carbon dioxide from the blood. This will then increase the pH so the breathing rate returns to normal. When you hold your breath, carbon dioxide accumulates in the blood, decreasing the pH. So when you hold your breath, your blood becomes acidic. The respiratory center, stimulated by those chemoreceptors, will override that voluntary inhibition of respiration and eventually force you to start breathing again. So, there you go. You should be able to explain why those chemoreceptors are important for the regulation of ventilation, and describe the importance of the respiratory control center in the brain, and discuss why it's really not possible to hold your breath for more than a minute or so.